empty praise I think that I deserve. Lord, I come to you and I confess nothing I desire compares. All is lost in the shadow of the cross. Everything will fade. Here I am, open hands, come fill my life again. You're all I need. All the pain and suffering, every tear and haunting memory. Through the storm you're calling out to me. Child, just lay it down and see. Child, just lay it down and see. That all is lost in the shadow of the cross. Everything will fade. Here I am, open hands, come fill my life again. You're all I need. You're everything. Through the waves, you are able. Through the doubt and the fear, you are there. Perfect love, awesome power, you are casting out all fear. You are all I need. Through the waves, you are able. Through the doubt and the fear, you are there. Perfect love, awesome power, you are casting out all fear. You are all I need. Even death has lost its sting. On my own, blind I may be. With your light I see. May I walk in your ways. Help me see the path you lay. I am yours, I am yours, I am yours. Abandoned self, Lord, here I am. Forever yours, I take this stand. I am yours, I am yours, I am yours. Open hands and open hearts. My life is yours, I'm set apart. I will follow, I will go. All my days are yours alone. Open hands and open hearts. My life is yours, I'm set apart. I will follow, I will go. All my days are yours
Welcome to Loving the World Online.
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 Welcome to Loving the World Online. Today we're starting our services at the Common Area Market. It's a new venue in town and making a play to have the best burger in town, and a town where hamburgers really matter, in the birthplace of the modern hamburger. It's amazing to think of our little town having a thing that's influenced the eating habits of people all around the world. When McDonald's waded into the debate about the history of the hamburger, it came out with Athens on top. Our service begins with the scripture, Psalm 13. It's a particular kind of psalm. It's not like lots of the psalms we love. It's a psalm of complaint. In it, David registers his complaint to God. God, I feel forgotten. God, the world around me is a disaster. Why does it look like evil keeps on winning? God, are you paying attention? It does not make it on everybody's best psalm list, but it feels like the last 10 days or so in America. I know that when I saw George Floyd being killed, I was sick to my stomach. I know that when I saw Amy Cooper call, threaten, and lie about a black man, that she was playing into the race, hatred, and fear of our world, and I felt cold on the inside. I knew that as I watched the rage of rioters who had felt abused, ignored, that some of my white friends were going to be more worried about buildings than bodies, and I was sad. God, it has been long enough that racial hatred has gripped our people. Also, this week, I've been at my father's bedside for hours as he lies in the transition from this world to the next. As we stop asking God to heal him in this world, but asking God to take him to the next, we've been telling God, it's been long enough. It's time for Mel to go into the arms of love. And so I've been praying Psalm 13 this week. And I'm wondering if you're feeling some of those losses too. Feeling some of these pains and just wondering if you've been asking God, why is it taking so long for things to get better?
I'm Jaime Cortez, Community Pastor, and at this time, we want to take 1 minute to pray together. So wherever you are, if it's in your living room, if it's in your car, we want to invite you to take 1 minute to pray out loud. We want to pray for our leaders, we want to pray for the church, and we want to pray for the sick during this time. So take 1 minute and pray.
In 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Lewis and Clark expedition and the opening of the West to settlers from the United States. It fell in a long line of expositions. The first Great World Exposition was held in London in 1851, about the time Athens was settled. People gathered to see the wonders of modern technology like the telegraph, microscope, an adding machine, a submarine, and a bicycle. It was so successful and made money, so it was copied 13 times over the next 50 years. Most were interesting, but have been largely forgotten. But one intersects with Athens, the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri. Nearly 20 million people attended the 9-month event, seeing displays from 62 different countries. President McKinley said, "Expositions are the timekeepers of progress. They record the world's advancement. They stimulate the energy, enterprise, and intellect of the people. They broaden and brighten the daily life of the people." The St. Louis Fair was the platform that introduced a number of important inventions to the world. The wireless telephone, the fax machine, and the X-ray all debuted at St. Louis. The personal automobile drew huge crowds a full 4 years before Ford started producing the Model T. But of most interest to Athens was the food vendors, and especially one of them, Uncle Fletch Davis, because that's where he went to flip burgers. It wasn't invented there, but it became popular there. For instance, fairy floss was known for about 100 years, but a machine debuted at the St. Louis World's Fair that could produce cotton candy fast, easily, and cheaply. The one true innovation that happened at the fair was the invention of the pointed waffle ice cream cone. Thank you, St. Louis. The story of a food vendor from Athens, Texas, helping the hamburger begin its ascendancy as the quintessential American food is a study in influence. If you're in the right place and have a powerful idea, then you have a chance to change the world. One of the driving forces behind the 1904 fair was showing the superiority of Americans above all others. We were the natural outcome of a long line of progress. We were intended to rule. See how smart we are, how powerful we are? The director of the exposition's anthropology department assembled the largest human zoo in world history. In it, over 10,000 people of color were conscripted to help tell the story of white superiority. Blacks were not allowed to attend the fair, but they could appear in the mock plantation that was set up on the main street. Indigenous people were brought out for display to show how we had conquered the savage and were going to better their lives. One of those was a man, Oda Binga, a Matubu tribesman from the Congo who was bought at the age of 20 and forcibly brought with 7 others to be displayed at the fair. Those ideas, just like the hamburger, spread across the world. It gave cover for the racists to point and proclaim that we were superior because we had won. Darwin was right. The fittest were the ones in power. And it's an ugly idea that has never left the American consciousness. That poverty and skin color are evidence of inferiority, of laziness, of not trying hard enough. That differences need to be feared, controlled, and subdued. It is an old and tragic idea. We didn't invent it, but we certainly popularized it. And most people have all sorts of subtle versions of it coursing around in their veins. Our encounter with Jesus today highlights the huge racial tension that existed in his time and the effort he took to dismantle those evil ideas. For the Jewish people, there existed 3 categories of people: the Jews, the Gentiles, who ranged from the God-fearers and worshiped Yahweh to the despised Romans and all those who colluded with them, and below them were the Samaritans. They were 100% useless, unredeemable, and to be feared and avoided. Welcome to our Yellow Chair interviews. Today, we're going to be interviewing a number of different people that have different perspective on what's going on in the world around us. And so we're going to begin with Kevin Habibulahian. Kevin, thanks so much for being here with us today. Could you introduce yourself to people who maybe don't know you?
My name's Kevin Habibulahian. I'm a CPA here in Athens. Been here for a little over 10 years now. Been working here. I've lived here for about 8 of those years. And so my wife and I have 2 children, Will and Landry, that are both different races than us. And so
that makes your story a little unusual, right? So tell us where Will's from. Tell her where Landry is from.
When we moved to Athens, we met the Bush family, and they introduced us to Buckner International, which kind of led us down the path of adopting Will through their Korea program. And then years later, we had kind of closed the door on adding to our family. We kind of felt like we were only going to have 1 child, and that was fine for us. And then a local physician here in town called us out of the blue and said, "Would you be willing to meet with this family?" And we said, "Okay, we're going to listen," and 4 days later, Landry came into our house. So that was a kind of polar opposites in how all that worked. One was long and drawn out, one was short and concise.
So the stuff that's going on in the world, I mean, we've kind of talked about this before, we kind of know. The fact that your children, one's of Asian descent, one's black, you're white, and when y'all are out in public, it's pretty obvious. So, I mean, kind of tell me how you're feeling about the way things are in the world and how that's impacting your family in particular.
It's scary, it's very scary. We're, even our oldest son is 8 years old, and he's picking up on these things, on what's happening in the world. As much as we try to shelter him from that, we've had our own encounters with prejudice in our own community, and we've had to have discussions with him.
Now, you've personally experienced some of the prejudice of our world, so tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I myself am Middle Eastern, and so I was born and raised here in East Texas, and I grew up in a very predominantly white community, and so I really didn't experience any of that growing up, because I was the youngest of 3 siblings, and it was just, Habibulahian, he's one of them, he's the third of the 3 siblings, and so it wasn't until I got into college that I understood, and it was after 9/11, and I'd experienced discrimination by a police officer,
Yeah.
of being pulled over. Rebecca was at work. She was student teaching at the time.
Right.
And I got pulled over because somebody saw me in the parking lot, and I had my cell phone on my hand, and they thought I was taking pictures, but I wasn't. Of course, I
Right.
gave the cop my camera. I was waiting on her to come out for lunch. And as I left, the parking lot, they pulled me over, and the guy saw my last name and started asking questions about, do you have any bombs and things like that in the car? And I was like, okay, this is what's going on here. But that personally, that's what I've experienced there. Some of the stuff around here in our community with our children comes more from Landry, with her being having African American descent. I truly do think locally our racism problem is more of a black and white issue.
Yeah, right.
And so it's the looks. We've gotten some comments whether we had a situation where a local firefighter, not in Athens, in a surrounding area, he was passing out firefighter hats and gave one to Will and looked at Landry and kind of skipped over her. Maybe they missed her inadvertently, but it was kind of a okay, was that something that was done intentionally? It makes you think.
Sure.
But most definitely Rebecca gets the looks more when she's out without me, when she's out with the kids without me, especially if she's just got Landry.
It makes me really sad that people are so driven to judge by the outside and looks and not come to know you and know your children and how beautiful and lovely they are. I'm sad about that. I'm sorry that y'all experienced that. But you were trying to help Will the other day, and Rebecca posted something that he said. Could you tell us about that post?
So they were outside, and Rebecca spends a lot of time outside with the kids, and they were drawing with sidewalk chalk, and Will's getting real inquisitive about our ethnicity, and so she was kind of going through. Okay, I'm as in Rebecca is 100% Caucasian. Dad is 50% Iranian and 50% Caucasian. Will is 100% Korean, and we had to kind of explain to him what that means. You're biologically 100% Korean. Now you're also 100% American. Right. And then Landry is 50% Caucasian, 50% African American. Right. And he mentioned that he was concerned for his sister's well-being with everything that was going on in the news, and I'm thinking, wow, he's picking up on this,
already.
And so Rebecca explained to him that we celebrate our differences.
So as she was explaining that to him, he drew something on the sidewalk. What did he draw on the sidewalk?
So she was going over our ethnicity and talking about how we celebrate our heritage, and that unfortunately not everybody feels the same way. And as they were kind of drawing explaining all this, the breakdown of our family, Will, unprompted, wrote 100% family under all of that.
So today, I want to ask you, if you post anything online, I want you to post hashtag 100% family as a way to kind of say to Will and to everybody else, we're all in this together. Because I think that's such an important story, and I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us, and tell you how proud we all are of your family and what you're doing. And we want to just rally everybody together to say, let's create a kind of place where a family like yours is just a normal family, and everybody loves you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
At this time, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer together. As a family, out loud, I invite you to join with me as we pray the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
I want to drill into the idea that this conversation between Jesus and the Samaritan woman is one of the most important boundary-breaking conversations in all of history. The view you bring to understanding the Samaritan woman is probably bound up in a ton of stuff you've heard about her That is not part of the text at all, but it is what we have passed on to each other as tradition, and it keeps you from seeing this text for what it is. Let's start with the context in the ministry of Jesus. In John chapter 2, Jesus begins his public ministry with a miracle, and then almost immediately heads to Jerusalem to start a riot. I've read this passage over and over again this week. I'm pretty sure I know a lot of Christians who are not going to like Jesus very much. He thought people were more important than property. It says in John chapter 2, verse 15, that he made a whip out of cords. Weapons were forbidden at the Temple Mount, and people were searched before they went up to worship. So Jesus had to improvise. If it shocks you to think of Jesus with a weapon, just remember that later, Jesus advises his disciples to get and carry swords. In some ways, that fact helped give the pretext for the governing officials to crucify Jesus on the charge that he was leading a rebellion. This is not your flannel board Jesus. Second, it says that he drove all from the temple area. This was not a small compound, at least 3 to 4 football fields in size. Jesus starts a stampede of goats and sheep, with bird cages falling on their sides and feathers going everywhere. He drives the animals off the Temple Mount. He attacked the merchants set up in the area. He turned over their tables. He scattered their monies, and he drove off their animals. Why was he so upset? Because about 2 to 3 years earlier, the high priest had moved the animal markets from outside, on the Mount of Olives, to inside the temple. This place, that was reserved for the Gentiles, no longer had room for the people God invited to meet with him there. It was clear that the Jews were protecting their place at God's table by driving the Gentiles away. And they were doing it through economic exploitation and abandoning the essential mission of God, to bless all the nations. Jesus had reached the breaking point where simply speaking up was not enough. I thought of the lone man standing in front of the tanks at Tiananmen Square as I watched protesters this week stand in front of cars, and I thought of Jesus. It says he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple court. Can you just see Jesus standing there, and someone comes up with stuff in their hands, and he just knocks it out of their hands? I'm afraid the picture of Jesus in your head doesn't fully match the Jesus in the Bible. He knew what was going on at the temple. They were preying on the poor. In fact, the high priest's family made profit by loaning poor people money so they could buy offerings for the temple. They made money off them when they had to exchange that money to temple money, and they made money from them when they raised the prices on the sacrificial animals. The poor did not have a chance. In one of the former Jewish revolts, the first thing that the people did was burn all the debtor notices owed by the temple priest. The system was broken. He knew what was supposed to be going on at the temple. He quotes part of the passage, "My house shall be a house of prayer for all people." And all the Jews would have known the rest. Let no foreigner who is bound to the Lord say, "The Lord will surely exclude me from his people." They were excluding God's people. Jesus set his ministry on a course to open God's love back up to all the nations. He was going to blow the lid off the racial control of the temple leaders. Later that night, Jesus meets with Nicodemus, and then he heads out of Jerusalem. And by the way, a couple of years later, Jesus shows up in Jerusalem and tries the same thing again, and within a week, he's put to death. The people in power hate rioters, but the poor, the powerless, loved him. Whatever we do with Jesus, we should never portray him as on the side of the powerful, protecting privilege, when in fact, he was executed for leading a rebellion to overturn the powers of this world. Today, we're joined by Mary Henderson, one of my friends from here in our community, and the longest tenured pastor, I believe, in our community. So, Mary, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, could you introduce yourself for people that somehow don't know you?
I am Mary Henderson, pastor of the Church of the Living God, Highway 175 East, for the last 26 years this year.
There you go.
And I've enjoyed ministry there.
And I've asked you here today because there's a lot of my community, in the white community, that are trying to figure out and trying to hear. And so we just need you to teach us a little bit. So kind of tell us how you're feeling about what's going on in the world around us.
Well, I look at what's going on now, and this is not the first that has something similar.
Right.
But now it's being reacted to differently. And there's a lot of good, and I remember Romans 8:28. It says all things work together for good to them that love God and are the called according to his purpose. And someone says, well, how can we get good out of this? And no matter how peaceful or how the ones who are protesting, there's always something else that comes up there. And I try to show my people and others that it's not all bad, and all people are not bad. And I read something, and it said, I believe the statement is, what has happened was beastly act, but we cannot hate the beast so much that we become the beast.
So I'm around white people who are kind of somewhat oblivious to the lives of black people, even in Athens. Can you tell me about racism in Athens? Kind of, I mean, does it happen here?
It does, and it's maybe not as open. No. It's always been something that happens. I was the first black at the First National Bank in Athens many, many years ago. And even then, it wasn't as the riots and the things like now, but it was there. And some things are kind of undercover.
Yeah.
They're not as open as it is. And there's maybe some people are uncomfortable in the presence of others, blacks. But I think the more that we have gotten together, we understand that our similarities rather than our differences. So it is. And I know even in the police departments, I'm sure it's kind of a hassle. They have to understand, what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we address this? How can we make it better? And then there are those who listen in the black community, and there are those who perhaps really don't. But I think when those who listen and try to do something about it outnumber the others, that's what we can see the most of. And I believe getting an understanding, a lot of the things that I saw on TV, which were really good, coming together.
Yeah.
And unless we come together and talk and communicate with one another, I don't know how you feel from just looking at you. You don't know how I feel. And it has been a lot of things. And as a female,
yeah, tell us about that. I mean, you're a female pastor.
Yeah, and that has been really a challenge in all these years. But And I had really questioned. I said, God, are you sure that you want me to do? I've read up on all the other things. And he said yes. And so for these, I guess, 30 years and 25 at the church there, God has allowed all these things to work together for good, but sometimes it was not so good. There are people that I'm in the midst of that I know that they don't like women ministers, but I say it's not about our gender, my gender, it's about Jesus. And if that's what I show them, they can see that and not just me being a female.
If you could help the white community, is there a couple of things we could do better? What do you think the city of Athens, the people in Athens could do that we could maybe make some progress? What would coming together look like?
My desire is that we could dialogue together. And it's not about any one person, one minister, or any of it.
Right.
All of us together. We have to get it inside before we can get it on the outside.
That's good.
So I really, my desire is to do whatever I can.
We've talked about it.
We've talked
We've been in lots of meetings. We've made some plans.
We
have
have
not gotten the traction that it feels like we need to accomplish some of the change that's necessary. And maybe this is the moment.
That's what I'm saying. This that happens, it said, it's recognized it is a real problem.
Yeah.
It's just not one issue that we hurriedly get it done and just for a photo op, I guess you'd say, and then coming together, but really getting down to it. That's my desire.
Yeah.
I really would like to see that. I'd love to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Mary, for being with us today. We appreciate it. And we're so proud of you, and bless your church and your leadership there. Thanks.
Thank you. God bless you.
Bye-bye. Jesus' radical agenda at the temple is the background to the next pivotal story, the Samaritan woman. This is the foundational text where Jesus begins to dismantle the racial and ethnic boundaries that had been artificially created in ancient Israel, designating who was in and who was out. It's about creating the new community that God promised through Abraham. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. It's about destroying the dividing line of hostility so clearly seen at the temple. It says in chapter 4, verse 4, he had to go through Samaria. Why would that be the case? The Jews at the time of Jesus never went through Samaria. They added 3 days to a 3-day journey from north to south to avoid going through Samaria. It was off limits. It was considered the wrong side of the tracks. That is where I'm filming my sermon this week, literally standing on the wrong side of the tracks. We all know that these two iron rails delineate where black people, white people, and brown people live in Athens. There's no point in kidding ourselves. Not much has changed. Everyone knows where the boundaries are. In Jesus' day, Jews did not go to Samaria for fear of attack. The violence inherent in the relationship between the two people groups formed the basis for Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan. Jews expected to be attacked by Samaritans, not helped by them. Jesus had to go through Samaria. Jesus was trying to radically disrupt the social order of his day. He was not just trying to save the souls of individuals. He was trying to save the soul of his nation. He was trying to return Israel to its God-given assignment. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. He chose to go to the heart of the greatest racial and ethnic problem of his day. He had to go through Samaria. He makes his way to the holiest spot for the Samaritans. It's Jacob's well. The bones of Jacob were in a tomb less than 100 yards away. The brothers of Joseph had sold him into slavery in sight of this well. This little well was nestled between two great mountains, Gerizim and Ebal. And Joshua had led the children of Israel to this spot when they conquered the promised land to recommit themselves to the covenant of God. He went and he sat down at the well. Just over his shoulders in the hills was the temple that had been rebuilt after the Jews had come in 129 BC and ordered all the Samaritans to convert to Judaism on penalty of death. They had massacred the people and destroyed the temple. The Jews hated the Samaritans because they felt like they were half-breeds. They had compromised with the culture around them and had abandoned Jerusalem. Jesus was sitting in the center of the most dangerous acre in Israel for a Jew. He was sitting in plain sight and waiting alone. And then comes our story. A woman arrives. Jesus asks her for a drink of water, and she bristles. How can you ask me for a drink?
Jesus came to a Samaritan village near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her,
"Please, give me a drink."
He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus,
"You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?"
If you knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water.
But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket, and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?
Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I will give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life.
Please, sir, give me this water, then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here to get water.
Go and get your husband.
I don't have a husband.
You're right. You don't have a husband. for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth."
Sir, you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshipped?
Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him. For salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way.
I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us.
I am the Messiah.
Just then his disciples came back. They were shocked to find him talking to a woman, but none of them had the nerve to ask, "What do you want with her?" or "Why are you talking to her?" The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone.
Unreserved, unrestrained, your love is wild. Your love is wild for me. It isn't shy, it's unashamed. Your love is proud to be seen with me, to be seen with me. You don't give your heart in pieces, and you don't hide yourself to tease us. Uncontrolled and uncontained, your love is a fire burning bright for me. It's not just a spark, it's not just a flame. Your love is a light, and all the world will see. Yeah. Oh, all the world will see, yeah, yeah, yeah. 'Cause you don't give your heart in pieces, and you don't hide yourself to tease us. And you don't give your heart in pieces, and you don't hide yourself to tease us more. Your love's not fractured, it's not a troubled mind. It isn't anxious, it's not the restless kind. Your love's not passive, it's never disengaged. It's always present, it hangs on every word you say. Love keeps its promises, it keeps its word, honors what's
We want to welcome Mike Taylor to our Yellow Chair interview right now. So, Mike, could you introduce yourself to people that don't know who you are?
My name is Michael Taylor. I'm from Jacksonville originally. Been down to Athens for about 14, 15 years. I coach at the local schools here and just happy to be here.
Tell us about your family.
Okay, I'm married for 21 years and, 20 years, I'm sorry, sir. I have two boys, 23 and 19. One is married, finna have a baby, so I'm finna be a grandpa. So
wow,
some kind of.
You're gonna be a grandpa. That's fun.
So my youngest one is 19. Is going to Trinity Valley College, trying to play basketball. So and they help me out when I do my little coaching for the for the AAU teams and stuff like that. So they giving back to
So you're a coach. I mean, that's kind of who you are. That's what you do. And you're trying to raise up kids. And I mean, in the middle of what's going on in our country, like what are you telling kids? What are the lessons that you hope that they'll learn, maybe that you can teach us?
Well, I know I tell mine to, like with the situation with the police, that just do what they say. Don't try to. I know it's nervousness that's gonna come through, and we all have that. I mean, especially if you think you did something wrong, or if you didn't do nothing wrong, it's still that's in the back of your mind because all these examples, bad examples, we are having, and it's hard for them to just drive without looking around their shoulder.
I think it's maybe complicated because as a white dad, I don't really remember having that kind of conversation with my kids.
Right.
Is it harder raising a black kid in our society right now? And I've heard people talk about giving their kids the talk. Tell me what that's about.
I mean, just as a parent in general, it's hard anyway to see your kid first starting to drive.
Right.
And like, you don't just drive for yourself, you drive for everybody else around you. So you got to have that talk. And then most people that's the only talk they have to have.
Yeah.
But as a black man, we got to have another talk. Like, because all these, like I said, bad examples that we are having about everything, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Because, you think of the police, and we was learned to serve and protect, but, like I said, these bad examples, and it's super hard.
It's a really painful time in our society, and I think a lot of us were hoping that we were better off than we are.
Right.
So can you tell me about moments where maybe you've experienced racism in our community around here?
Well, me personally, I haven't. Well, yes, I was working at Walmart before I became a coach, and I was the only one back there. I was working in electronics, and I was the only person that was back there. And this lady came in, and she said, "Could you help me?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." But I'm looking because this is my first time starting working there, and it's like my second or third day or something like that. And I was like, okay. So I was like, well, I don't know where my coworkers are, but I'll try to help you find something, because she was looking for a certain DVD.
Right.
And I know we had that big old $5 box, so don't nobody want to dig in that.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I think I seen that video back there in the back, so I went to the back. And by the time I came back, my supervisor or my other coworker came back and said that, she said, well, man, black people are so slow. They stupid, they slow. So when I got back, she told me this, and I was like, and she felt bad for me. I was like, man, I try to just don't even worry about it. But I was the only person, no matter what color, the only one that was trying to help her.
Right.
And I thought that would make her be a little patient, but still, when you come to Walmart, everybody wanted in and get out of there. Everybody just don't want to shop. But so I just let it roll off of me, man. She didn't personally say it to me, man. If she said it to me personally, it probably would have hurt even more.
Right.
Because I was the only one trying to help. So.
Yeah, it's just that kind of underlying attitude in her, judging you, not knowing you, didn't even know what you were doing for her, trying to help her.
Right.
If you could try to help white people, what could we do to be better? What do we need to hear from the black community that maybe we're not hearing?
The main thing is you got to listen. I think if we listen, because experience is a lot. I mean, that means a lot. And a lot of people don't understand, probably never will understand. But when somebody's trying to tell you something, I listen anyway, you know, but especially with this situation here, I mean, we as a group, we all one race. So we all got to come together and just try to see, I guess the main thing I'm trying to say is just try to see where another person is coming from.
Right.
You know, and as teachers and coaches, that's what we try to do to our students. Like, I got to understand where you're coming from. So now I know how to deal with you better. Right. And that's the way we try to do it on the school level, here anyway. I mean, I can't say anybody else, but just get to know the person. I mean, just don't look at skin, because we teach ours not to look at skin, look at the person, because truth be told, we the same.
Yeah.
You know, when it's all said and done, we the same.
We're so proud of the work you're doing in our schools, and thanks so much for visiting with us today.
Yes, sir.
And we're all praying that maybe this is a moment that our society can get better.
Right.
And that's what we hope for.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Let's just stop a second and try to get that moment through our heads and hearts. This woman is offended for at least 3 reasons. It was totally inappropriate for a man to talk in public to a woman who was not of his family. He was a Jew, she was a Samaritan, and they were bitter enemies. He was some sort of good-for-nothing beggar who did not have his own bucket, cup, or utensil, was wanting something from her. I mean, don't you hate it when a person who is down and out comes panhandling for food and water? She sized him up instantly and knew that they were not cut from the same cloth, that they were entirely different.
I was shocked, confused, bewildered as I entered heaven's door, not by the beauty of it all, nor the lights or its decor,
but it was the folks in heaven who made me sputter and gasp, the thieves, the liars, the sinners, the alcoholics, and the trash.
There stood the kid from my 5th grade, who swiped my lunch money twice. Next to him is my old neighbor, who never said anything nice.
Bob, who I always thought was rotting away in hell, was sitting pretty on cloud 9, looking incredibly well.
I nudged Jesus, what's the deal? I would love to hear your take. How did all these sinners get up there? God must have made a mistake.
And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? Give me a clue. Hush, child, he said. They're all in shock. No one thought they'd be seeing you.
I love that little poem because it so simply captures the internal dialogue that we have when we know for sure that people not like us are not liked by God. Too many of us are sure we have a leg up in heaven. That's the idea Jesus wants to destroy. Jesus starts to talk to the woman about water, something the book of John is deeply concerned about. He says that she will be asking him for water by the time the conversation is over, and he offers her living water, and in fact, she asks for it from Jesus. Then the story gets really interesting. He sends her after her husband. She tenses. We don't know her real story, but the story we tell ourselves is the kind of story we love to tell about other people. It makes us feel superior, it makes us feel better, it makes us feel purer. We tell ourselves she was an immoral woman. We tell ourselves she was sneaking off in the hot part of the day to hide from the other women, to make her feel different from ourselves. We make her out to be a harlot. Here is a woman that is so in need of personal forgiveness because she is such a great sinner. There is, however, nothing in the text to indicate that this is true, and there are many things to indicate that it is not. She could have been the subject to the Levirate laws that required brothers to marry the same woman if they die. She could have been unable to have children, and man after man discarded her when she did not give them what they wanted. She could have been incredibly old and outlived lots of husbands and had the worst run of luck, and now she's been taken in by some distant relatives and has a place to stay, but not much else, certainly not much love. Our obsessive need to feel superior to the woman, to cast her in a bad light, means we don't hear the intelligence of the woman, her deep understanding of the differences between the Jews and the Samaritans, and the fact that she is waiting for the Messiah. When Jesus claims to be the Messiah, he's building off of the shared biblical tradition of the Jews and the Samaritans. That's what they're talking about. First, he solved a big debate, where people should worship. This mountain, that mountain. The two groups have been arguing about geography for 500 years, and Jesus wipes it away and says, true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. Second, he identifies the Messiah. The Samaritans did not recognize the prophets as Holy Scripture, which is where most of our understanding of the Messiah comes from. But they did have one clear messianic prophecy. They both shared it, and it came out of the very story of the well they were sitting by. At the end of Jacob's life, when he's dying in Egypt, all of his sons gather around him, and he blesses them one after another. He comes to Judah, announcing that the tribe of Judah will be the ruling tribe. The people took their name, Jews, from Judah. They were the largest tribe, and out of them would come the Messiah. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. This woman knew the scriptures. She knew where they were standing, and she knew that the Messiah would come from the tribe of Judah. She knew that Jesus was a Jew from the tribe of Judah. Jesus tells her he is the Christ, the Messiah, the promised one. That's what sends her to the village. So we're joined by Jorge Rivera. So Jorge, introduce yourself to people who maybe don't know you.
Yeah, I am Jorge Rivera. I am currently the interim student pastor here at First Baptist Athens. I was born and raised in Mexico, moved to the United States when I was young, went to college in San Antonio, then went to college in Baylor where I met Michelle, which is how a lot of you might know me a lot better. Michelle's been in Athens for about 10 years now. And so that's my wife. We got here, we got married, had Adeline. So Adeline's our 2-year-old daughter, and you'll see a lot of pictures of her if you follow me on social media.
So I've been asking a number of people in our community about their experience of racism, kind of what's happened. Because I think if we can get more people to hear those stories, maybe, especially white people, could maybe get a little better. So can you tell me how that's happened in your life, kind of some of your experiences?
Yeah, it's happened in several different ways. The first way that I experienced it when I first moved to the United States, so I learned English pretty quickly. God bless me, because it was difficult, but I had to learn English because nobody spoke English, and I was forced to kind of be able to speak English and understand it for my family. And I remember being in school in Mexico. I was always in higher classes. I was in the more advanced classes and everything. And so when I moved to the United States, I was doing classes that I had already done maybe a year ago even in Mexico. And so I remember going to the counselor's office and saying, hey, I need to move forward. I've already taken these classes, but because I wasn't from the United States, they said, no, you can't go to those classes. And I was like, well, why not? And they're like, well, because you're not from here. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so they made me take a test to see like my English comprehension, and I passed it with flying colors. And I was like, okay, there we go. Now I can get in those classes. They're like, no, you can't get in those classes. And I was like, why not? And so it was just this constant battle of them not wanting to outright say, well, it's because you're from Mexico.
Yeah, it's kind of all that prejudgment, all that just look at you and push you to the side kind of happened over and over again.
Yeah.
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 So if you could help white people, like what do white people need to hear right now? I mean, there's lots of pain in our society about racial issues right now. What do you think we need to hear?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that white people need to hear, but I think one of the most important things is hearing stories of people who have experienced it and have lived it. We tend to see this issue as something that we see on the news that feels far away. We become desensitized, and it's not close. It's the moment whenever it becomes near to you and personal to you that you actually start seeing it unfold in a lot of different ways.
You've even kind of told me that sometimes you experience people around here who know you and treat you individually well, but they treat other people differently. Like what they post seems racially motivated. Like why do people do that differently, do you think?
It's part of the unknown, right? It's like you've put this title and this image and this judgment upon the word Hispanic or upon the word immigrant or upon whatever the word that it is that you might be looking for, that it just becomes this blank title that you look at and automatically think of something. But people that know me, they don't see Hispanic, immigrant, or anything like that. They see Jorge, right? And so, I mean, they know it's said differently, but they see me and they know me. And it's that moment where it's personal. It's a personal relationship that you have with somebody that changes for whatever reason. And because the label, they're able to take that label away from me in a moment because they know who I am.
So something else going on in the middle of all the crazy up there. There's something going on personally for you. Tell us some good news in your life.
Yes. So right before quarantine happened, I had been in conversation with a church, South Garland Baptist Church. And, in the church world, you they offer you the job and then you say yes or no. And then it doesn't matter whether you say yes or no, the church has to vote. And so they were supposed to have voted the week that quarantine happened. And so it was this 2-month waiting of just not knowing when the church was going to be able to meet, kind of in the same boat where we are. And they decided to start a little earlier. And so this past Sunday, I went to South Garland Baptist Church and they had a vote and it was unanimous. And it is a yes. And so we are excited to announce, and sad to announce at the same time, that we will be moving to Garland and be the next senior minister at South Garland Baptist Church.
And that's going to happen quick.
Quick, yes. So last Sunday here will be June 14th, and I start there June 15th. Right.
So because we won't be meeting on the 14th, but we will be doing something on the 10th. So we want to invite you on Wednesday, June the 10th, to the church. We're going to have an outdoor singing and a little celebration for Jorge and Michelle and Adeline as we send them to South Garland Baptist Church, honoring God's calling in their life and their ministry and the work that they've done for us. And we want to say congratulations to you and say how sad we are that both the things are a mixture. And thanks so much for your service in our church.
Thank you guys for having us.
Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah?
So the people came streaming from the village to see him. Many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said,
"He told me everything I ever did."
When they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Then they said to the woman, "Now we believe, not just because of what you told us, but because we have heard him ourselves. Now we know that he is indeed the Savior of the world."
Her testimony is simple and clear. He told me everything I ever did. This is the thing that remakes her life. Our tendency is to read it through the lens of sin and Jesus enumerating those sins, but it's better to take it at face value. He knows everything about my life. He knows I'm a woman. He knows my race. He knows my mind. He knows my awkward situation, and still he's offering me eternal life. He's offering me a way out of 500 years of pain and madness. He's offering me a new way of life that's not about ritual and place, but about spirit and truth. To be fully known and fully loved is the greatest gift of God. To be fully known and fully loved is the greatest gift of God. It leads to repentance. It leads to humility. It leads to returning the love of God. When Jesus talked to her as a man to a woman, he started to erase an age-old taboo because he invited her into the same family. When he spoke to her as a Jew, he began to erase 500 years of seeing each other as enemies, and instead asked her to see them both as part of one family. When he offered to give her living water, he took the form of a servant doing work reserved only for women, and he started to erase the age-old gender bondage of society. When he superseded her mountain and the mountain of the Jewish people and replaced it with worshiping in spirit and truth, he destroyed the last barrier separating people from God and each other, because he invites everyone into the family in every place and every time. When we look at the TV and see people reacting in violence and pain, we should be moved first by compassion and not judgment, for they are our family members. When we see the foot on the neck of one of our family members, we should know that it is a sign of the old broken system that Messiah comes to set us free from. When we see year after year our family members in pain, we should marvel at their patience and not see everything through the lens of a few days of overwhelming grief that wells up into action. The story of the Samaritan woman is not a story of a bad woman who gets rescued out of sin and shame, but the story of a person who is seen as other, discarded, and useless by the Jews of her day, until she meets Jesus, who invites her to be part of the new family he is creating. One where every race belongs, one where every gender is valued, one where men and women are created on equal footing, one where you can be exactly who God made you to be and be accepted. You don't have to change your skin or your accent. You just have to open your heart to Jesus. Wouldn't it be amazing if Athens could influence the world again? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could be part of a movement of God to erase the systemic racism of our country that continues to hold us all in bondage? Wouldn't it be of Jesus if what we are known for is not burgers, but brotherhood? To make that happen, we'll have to follow Jesus across the tracks and into the lives of people we too often fear and see as other than ourselves. Jesus had to go to Samaria, and so must we, because that's where you go to find your family and bring them home. Thanks for worshiping with us today. We're not done yet. I hope that you'll click on the fantastic Next Links button. There's a lot of stuff for you there. Stuff that's theirs every week. Worship music that might help calm your spirit and lift you. There's an online giving button. You can check our giving, and we want to thank everybody for helping to take care of our church. There's family activities and a matching game and my research notes. And you can participate in our news survey, trying to help guide us as we prepare to open up our church for corporate worship. And one thing that's new today is a link of readings and next steps. Maybe what's gone on in our country over the last couple of weeks has been troubling you. We've gathered a bunch of articles, ones that have helped our thinking, ones that have helped us understand and listen to different voices, and I'd encourage you to go there and read some of them. There's some next steps of things that you proactively could do to try to help make the world a better place for everyone to live in. So we hope you'll join us. Now it's time to say goodbye, and we do it with our motto. So wherever you are, why don't you stand up and say it with us?
Love God, live like Jesus, serve others.
Let's go.
Thank you.